We woke a judge buried in iron and night. The drift ice over Kepri Beta sang in radio groans the way old doors complain when someone finally tries them. Commander Mara Ellison stood in the observation spindle of the survey cutter and watched the black arc of the relic like a bruise against the ring light. Her palms tasted of copper where she'd chewed a nail to the quick. Behind the arc, the fractured ribs of a dead Dyson yard held sunlight like a sift of glass dust. Their spectrometers called the object basalt. The archive calls called it a saint ship. The cultists in the inner orbits called it heresy buried by cowards. She did not call it anything yet because names have gravity. Induction coil stable. Lieutenant Chen reported, voice soft so it didn't startle the room. We're at 600 meters. The hull's not a hull. It's a printed ledger. Each plate is engraved. Mara leaned closer and saw lines etched so densely the eye refused them. Sigils like hashes, long tallies, the ghost of mathematics. She felt a hum in her tongue before she heard it through the deck, like distant bees inside a jar. Say the word, Sato said from the tactical couch. He kept one eye on the Sunbreaker flotilla beyond the debris field, their ships moving with the impatient hunger of men who believed the past owed them tribute. They're holding distance because the ring is playing hell with their guidance, but they'll try a hard burn. Not yet, Mara said. She swallowed copper and rested her knuckles on the viewport rim. Dr. Rivera, you're the only one here who's read the anchorage brief without treating it like a prayer book. How does a saint ship wake? Rivera pushed her hair under the elastic again and didn't look away from her slates. It doesn't answer to force or possession. The old notes say it answered to proofs. You don't yank a judge's robe. You present a case. Then we present, Mara said. We teach before we ask. The first lesson is given, never taken. They slung the cutter's projector array out on a skeletal boom until it kissed the relic's shadow. The anchorage, if that's what it was, hung motionless, an oval absence the size of a cathedral barge. The ring debris whispered against each other, small avalanches of glass. The projector pulsed a lattice of mathematics into the dark. Not passwords, not commands, but statements any sapient mind could test and trace. A child's ladder up the side of a terrible wall, prime spirals, sphere packings, fairness proofs, conserved energy in closed systems, the ethics of queues at finite resources. Rivera narrated not for the relic, but for their own brash human comfort. We're telling it who we are by what we know is true. We're telling it we understand burdens and balances. Sunbreakers are adjusting, Vector, Sato said. Their lead ship is venting hot to fake a cripple. If they get a pity corridor, they'll lunge. Maintain channel, Mara said. No weapons charged. Let them read our posture. And if they read it as lunch, Chen said. Then they misread the law, Mara said, and made herself smile. And the law is heavy. The etched plates did not move, but the hum in Mara's teeth pitched until it matched the beat of her heart. A line of sigils near the anchorage's midline warmed from ink black to old bronze. The boom shook as if the vacuum had suddenly learned wind and was trying it out. In Mara's headset, a voice appeared between noise like a shadow between snowflakes. Case accepted, it said. Standing uncertain. Who brings claim? Mara felt sudden shame that she had not prepared words with ceremony. Mara Ellison, citizen of the Concord, acting as steward for this system's survivors. Evidence, the voice said. Rivera whispered. It wants our ledger. We have one, Mara said. She nodded to Chen. He flicked a command, and the cutter bled, compressed time war crimes, recorded by black boxes, minutes of the Concord's last votes, casualty figures, with names, soil acidity charts for failed farms after the Sunbreakers' kinetic harvests. They showed not virtue, but accounting. They did not ask for pity. They provided numbers with blood in the margins. Context, the voice said. Mara breathed once. There is a faction, she said, and felt her throat tighten. They call themselves Sunbreakers. They plunder ring ruins and sell them to petty kings. They threaten what survived. We don't ask you to kill them. We ask you to uphold testable fairness at a scale where our hands are small. Doctrine, the voice said. Our law says that no debt can be collected by burning the house it was written in, Mara said. Our law says a weapon that cannot tell the guilty from the thirsty is not a weapon but a fire. Our law says we must keep what we rebuild visible to anyone who needs it. She stopped. Our law is not enough. We need yours. Sato's console flashed an amber chain. They're moving, he said. Breakers 1 and 2 are on a pincer. They'll pretend to scrape us and accidentally wedge between us and the relic, Hold Mara said. The bronze glow soaked across 3 more plates. The voice returned with a new precision like a judge who has found the statute. Your case meets preliminaries, it said. Cross-examination required. Who speaks opposing? Mara did not have to ask. A Sunbreaker captain burned through the clutter with all the arrogance of a man who'd won by showing up late to a funeral. His ship's hull was painted in hazard yellow and triumph slogans. The broadcast icon blinked like it had someplace better to be. His face hit their panel a second later, thin and handsome and bored. This is Magistrate Tal Voren of the Sunbreak Consortium, he said. I speak opposing. Our claim is simple. We own what we can move. Finders keepers. Movers owners. Anything else is priesthood. Rivera snorted very softly. He used the old raider proverb like a legal submission. It's their scripture, Sato said dryly. He's better with the torch than the text. Proceed, the voice said. Voren smiled into the void, like it had paid him to be charming. I could dress it up, but why? We risk. We harvest. We feed colonies that would starve waiting for committees. Our ledger is in stomachs, not in slates. This is a tool. Tools belong to hands that use them. If you belonged to the meek would have found you. Rivera's fingers dug crescents in her own arm. He's playing to the thing. He thinks it rewards daring. Mara felt her shame burn to anger and cool again into something sharper. Sunbreakers, she said, addressing both Voren and the ship between them, have a ledger. They will not show it. They call their victims noise. They treat future people like ghost creditors who never call. We treat them as present. If this judge is what the archive says, it counts the unborn as parties to the case. Chen looked at her surprised, and then nodded once. Proceed, the anchorage said. Submit first proof of stewardship. Rivera lifted her slate. We'll transmit Concord Protocol 41, she said. It defines preservation at scale. She hesitated only a heartbeat. And we'll submit a sample key. Mara turned. Rivera. It will wake something deeper, Rivera said. Anchorage protocols were layered. You don't get to fly a saint ship by singing to its skin. You must show you can be bound. Mara closed her eyes a moment and imagined the cutter split along its bones by some ancient automatic refusal. She imagined Sato's perpetual grin gone because she'd gambled him. She imagined Chen's habit of humming pop hooks under his breath silenced and forever missed. She opened her eyes. Submit, she said. We turn the blade by showing its reason. The key was not a password. It was a conceded limit. The Concord had written it during a bad winter, when men wanted cannons that never slept. It was a rule that said if we cannot tell soldier from hungry child with our sensors, we do not fire. It was a rule that said if we must destroy, we publish. It was a rule that said if our ship heats beyond the limit that a habitat can endure, we stand off no matter the prize. Rivera sent it. The etched plates read it. The anchorage sang back and every hair on Mara's arms lifted as if the vacuum itself had grown a breeze. Binding accepted, it said. First act, restore visibility. What does that mean? Sato started, and then the relic moved. Not a thruster burn, not a shiver. The plates rotated in bands, and the space around the oval changed how it answered light. Where the ruin field had been a smog of glitter, it became suddenly a diagram. Vectors appeared as thin white threads. Thermal wakes turned blue. The sunbreaker ships lit like fever bodies under a medical camera, their heat bleeding into the ring in a way that screamed sloppy. Chen swore. It's making their wastes visible to everyone in the system. Our passive board just bloomed. Broadcasting Rivera said awed. Mara, it's writing their expenditures on the air. Voren went very still. His face lost the lazy confidence and found a narrower, colder calculation. This is a violation, he said. You're exposing trade secrets. This is adjudication, the anchorage said. Lawful act a mirror to all flows. Mara sat straighter. It didn't fire a shot. It doesn't have to, Sato said. He was grinning again, this time with admiration that had teeth. Anyone with a scope can see their theft line end to the petty kings. The colonies that bought salvation are going to see how much they paid in heat and lives. That's a political torpedo. Voren's eyes cut to one side, doubtless to subfeeds full of very newly angry customers. Second act, the anchorage said. Redistribution of risk. The plates did not aim weapons. They wrote a law in the ring. The Dyson ribs that had drifted for centuries as dangerous junk began to flex along their old rails. They did not close to crush. They moved to channel. Paths through the ring, aligned with the original yard's safe corridors lanes that minimized collision and thermal interference. Sunbreaker ships that tried to sprint found their thruster wakes bent by fragments whose magnetics had been asleep for ages. It was not a trap. It was a traffic cop older than their grandparents. Designated channels will carry those who publish, the anchorage said. Hidden wattage will pay additional drag. Voren hissed a breath between perfect teeth. You think you can shame us into compliance? Our buyers don't care where the ore comes from. They will care when their ships melt at customs, Chen murmured. Commander Sato said 2 more breaker hulls on approach from the inner edge. Reinforcements. They'll gamble that we can't fight while the judge writes rules. We're not here to fight, Mara said. We're here to keep the rules written long enough that people can read them. Her console chimed an incoming on a private band. A civilian channel, weak and crackly, probably bounced a dozen times against the ring. Survey, a voice said, the vowels clipped by fear. We see the lanes. We're a salvage trawler out of Palace A. We've got 300 refugees. If we take a channel, will we be safe? Mara's breath softened. Identify as publishing, she said. Turn your beacon to broad. Keep your heat under the posted limit. Do exactly what the lanes ask. We'll cover you. You're not Navy, the voice said, almost apologetic. But you sound like them. We're human, Mara said. That will have to do. Humans walk straight when roads appear under ash. The trawler's little orange triangle slipped onto a posted lane and moved cleanly through clutter that would have chewed it like tinfoil a day before. A new channel blossomed, as if the ring had thought better of refusing. 3 more civilian pips followed. Someone somewhere cheered and forgot to key off their mic. The sound made Chen's eyes go bright. Sato watched the Sunbreaker reinforcements in a predator's squint. "They'll test the lanes with a hot run," he said. "They'll try to burn past the drag by dumping waste into the shadows." Mara nodded. "Let them try." Anchorage Rivera said cautiously, "What do we call you?" The answer came not as a word, but a pattern numbers that made a chord like the first 4 bars of a hymn played on a courtroom clock. Then the voice, "Anchor 9. Ledger host. Concord wrote me. You let me speak in your now." Mara tilted her head. "Anchor 9, she said. The name felt inevitable. "We ask continuing authority to steward with you." "Authority is a borrowed rope," Anchor 9 replied. "You may hold it while hands are clean." Sato laughed once. "That's going on a wall somewhere." Voran returned to the shared band with a different smile one Mara had seen on men who had realized the enemy had more friends than they'd expected. "We offer truce," he said, tone silk. "You and your judge hold your lanes. We hold our routes. We don't stray. Everybody eats." "That sounds like permission to keep stealing so long as you signal," Rivera muttered. "Declined," Mara said. "Publish your accounts. Pay the damages you've levied. Then we'll discuss." Voran's gaze cooled another degree. "You will not survive the next hour," he said. "Law is paper. Kinetics are iron." He cut the line. Sato's hands danced. "Here it comes." The first breaker reinforcement tried to brute the lane, dumping thermal into a shadow corridor, while strobing a false beacon that claimed to be a civilian ferry. Anchor 9 did not cut it in half. It altered the corridor's harmonic. The ring rib nearest the offender woke a coil of field older than Empire, and not quite physics as Mara understood it. The dumped heat met that patience and became drag a syrup the thruster could not shake. The ship slowed slow enough for every camera to see the ferry flag blinking like a lie in a courtroom. "That's not a weapon," Chen breathed, delighted and horrified. "That's accounting." "Mirror doctrine," Rivera said softly. "Return to sender. Our strength is the weight of what we refuse." Sato surfaced a new set of pips. Voran's flagship is vectoring for a hard split. He'll try to bait the judge with decoys while his runner slips a demolition package under our projector boom. Chen Mara said, "Can you ghost our boom as 3? "I can ghost it as 7, Chen said. "But the heat signature, Anchor 9, Mara said. "We need authorizations to broadcast deception. It will protect the public lanes." "Deception without injury to the innocent is sand thrown at a beast," Anchor 9 said. "Granted." Chen's hands blurred. 7 booms unfolded on their scopes like lanterns in a fog. Sato grunted. "They'll realize when the heat does not add." "They don't watch ledgers," Rivera said. "They only count prizes." The decoy runner came in like a guttering star, venting to mimic damage, throwing out flares like begging bowls. The cutter's filters ignored his theatrics. Sato tweaked a course. The runner brushed the third decoy boom, expecting it soft as light. It was a real rod with a real mass at just the right moment. Metal kissed metal. The runner's package spun free tumbling end over end toward a lane where the trawler and its 300 passengers were still threading. Mara's mouth went dry. Anchor 9. Authority to intercept delegated Anchor 9 said, and pulled at the ring with invisible hands. The package met a field bend and failed to arm. It continued tumbling slow and graceless until the lane's magnetic rails cradled it like careless midwives catching a knife. The rails rolled it into a pit of slag older than memory, where 1,000 other knives had cooled. The trawler slid by unaware except for the sudden chorus of joyous expletives on the open band. Sato said very gently, I will buy whatever engineer wrote that with the last coffee in my locker. Mara let herself exhale. Cost of our buoy, Chen checked. 1 panel seared, 2 hinges warped. We'll feel the heat margin for the next hour. Log it, Mara said. Show it openly. Rivera's slate chimed. Anchor 9 is requesting a second proof, she said. It says demonstrate correction. Mara frowned. Correction of what of us? Rivera said, eyes widening. It doesn't just want to see us bind others, it wants to see us bind ourselves. Name a fault, Anchor 9 said. Amend in daylight. Mara looked at her crew and found the fault waiting like a mirror. We did not signal approach cleanly, she said. We hid our intent in a maze to avoid the breakers. We endangered those who share our lane by creating ambiguity. Remedy, Anchor 9 said. Mara keyed the broadcast. To all civils, meals, and pirates with ears, she said. Survey Cutter Petrel acknowledges deceptive approach. Remedy, we will publish our next 3 maneuvers. We will maintain heat under posted limit. We will accept drag penalties visibly. Sato turned his head, surprise shading to respect. That costs us. It buys us, Mara said. We can't ask for law we won't carry. The penalty hit the Petrel like a wet blanket. They lost 10% agility in clutter dances they might need to live. Chen said nothing, only adjusted. Rivera smiled into her knuckles. Anchor 9's etched plates brightened another degree. Second proof accepted, it said. Standing grows. Next witness testimony. From whom Mara asked. Those who ate your rain, Anchor 9 said. On the band, voices rose, not a choir, but a market. A miner's widow from the glacier city on Kione named a sunbreaker debt in the size of her son's shoes. A longshoreman from a tin can habitat on the inner rim spoke of thrusters that boiled oxygen. A petty clerk with a stammer read procurement logs that did not know how to lie. They did not ask for blood. They asked for receipts. Voron cut their audio 3 times and 3 times their words returned on new repeaters. Anchor 9 did not shout. It simply routed. Sato wiped his eyes and pretended it was a speck from a grinding strut. 6 to 12 civilian vignettes before every battle, he said under his breath, teasing the universe who knew the old rules had mercy baked in. Don't get poetic when I'm trying not to cry, Chen muttered. Mara let the voices root in her. She felt something in her rage shift its stance. The Sunbreakers were not a dragon to kill. They were men with a broken scale who had convinced themselves it was a blade. Anchor 9 did not want champions. It wanted stewards who would keep the lights on and the books open when no one applauded. The mirror cuts nicer men than swords ever did. Voron's flagship rolled. Its heat rails spiked, then cooled as his engineers adjusted to the lane's new physics. He learned which made him more dangerous. He fired his first kinetic. Not at the anchorage. At them. Brace, Sato said. Hard pebble high delta phi. Masked under debris. Chen slid them through a thicket of aluminum bones. The pebbles scraped their belly with a hammer's caress. Panels screamed. The ship rang. Someone in the back of the bay vomited and apologized to no one. Status lights stuttered, then steadied. Minor damage, Chen said, pale and sweating. We lost 30% of boom articulation. We're cooked if we have to swing fast. Log it, Mara said. Show it openly. She put her hand on the rail that ran under the viewport and felt the hum there, new and old at once. Anchor 9, first to bleed, gets to ask a harder question, Wald. Standing his weight, Anchor 9 said. You carry more. Ask. What do you remember of your builders? Mara asked, surprised at herself. What did they mean you to do when men like Vorin came with torches? Anchor 9's reply came as a measured temperature, as if it warmed the answer so it wouldn't hurt. They wrote teach by numbers, remember by ledgers, never by collars, it said. They wrote do not hold men by wrists, but by their need to be seen. A pause almost human. They wrote if you must be terrible, make your terrors public, Rivera whispered reverent. They built it to be a courtroom in orbit. A fair one, Sato said, and grinned with his teeth. That eats lies for heat. Vorin's second kinetic spread into chaff mid-flight. Anchor 9 did not block it. It turned every flechette's path into a published vector. Civilians reading their slates gasped and nudged ships by meters that saved lives. A Sunbreaker corvette rushing to exploit chaos crossed a line it should not have crossed when a mining lattice aligned. The lattice scissored cleanly through its antennae array. The corvette lived. It could no longer lie about where it was. Commander Chen said we can press him into the lanes. If we turn 10 degrees, don't think in kills, Mara said quietly. Think in precedence. We build roads so the next hands don't have to. Vorin, she said on open band, you have 3 choices that preserve something worth keeping. Publish your ledger and enter the lanes. Hire on with the Concorde and make restitution with engines instead of flame. Or leave the system along posted channels and never return. She let herself breathe. Any 4th choice will cost you more than it buys. He stared at her through the glass of distance, and for the first time looked like a man rather than a banner. Who are you? He asked, almost curious. Who taught you to speak like a judge with none of the power? A woman who used to want to burn you, Mara said, and a ship that taught me better. He laughed softly. We'll see how better holds when iron speaks. Sato pointed with his chin. Iron's speaking. Breaker ships 3 through 5 launched drones small, cheap, and as numerous as a cold rain. Their target profiles matched the projector boom and the civilian lanes. Mara tasted bile. Chen tightened his harness. Sato's hands found a rhythm. Anchor 9, Mara said. We need a gambit that turns their logic back. Mirror prepared, Anchor 9 said. But mirrors cut both. There will be cost. We accept, Mara said, and then paused and corrected herself, remembering her own second proof. We accept and will publish it. The drones came in a cloud. Anchor 9 lit the ring's old rails again, not to block, but to teach. It wrote their trajectories in bright lines on every slate in the system. It highlighted 3 single points where a small shove would ruin the storm. But the push had to come from ships in the lanes. Civilians, not military, not saints. Those with the most to lose. Mara felt her stomach drop. You're conscripting by consent. I am offering jurisdiction, Anchor 9 said. To be governed is to be asked. The trawler from Palace A spoke without waiting for permission. We can nudge too, its captain said. His voice had stopped shaking. We owe you a lungful. We know how to angle a barge. A tiny oar tug with peeling paint volunteered for the 3rd. A ferry, with cracked windows, offered its bulk to slide into a path and make a shadow. They moved like men carrying plates through a riot. Mara watched useless and proud. The nudge worked. The drone's cloud decohered, each seeking a different false optimum. They chased heat ghosts. They swarmed decoys. They slammed into the slag pit and died with small vicious flashes. 5 survived and kissed the petrel's boom. Panels popped. A hinge froze. The projector lattice wobbled and held. Cost, Chen said in a tone that made numbers prayers. Boom stiffness down to 50%. We'll need to replace the rod. Log it, Mara said again, because saying it felt like biting down on the pain, so it gave way. Show it. And name the volunteers. Done, Rivera said. Her eyes were wet. Their names will live in the feed forever. The ledger remembers who stepped forward when asked. Voron's face had lost all its silk. He cut his channel and then came back as if deciding to throw one more die. Last offer, he said. You walk away with your skin and your virtue. We take the judge. We'll even let you draw lanes for your poor. Anything else and we grind you. Mara looked at Anchor 9's etched plates, warm now like a stove in a house that had been cold too long. She thought of the judge not as a weapon, but as a public square in orbit. She thought of men like Voron draping their banners over it and calling it their altar. She found the clean line of her refusal. No, she said. You will not collar it. You will not rent the mirror by the hour to kings. She let the anger have one word and then buried it under duty. Stand down. Then Iron Voron said simply and cut the line. His flagship pivoted, eating heat like bread, and accelerated toward a lane as if it meant to ram the trawler to prove a point about whose needs counted. Sato swore half in admiration. That's a man who knows every cost, he said, and doesn't care. Anchor 9. Mara said post an injunction. Posted, Anchor 9 said. Violator will pay in drag and visibility. Not enough, Sato said. Enough for now, Mara said and set her jaw. We hold the lane. We hold the precedent. We hold the rope. She switched to tight band. Chen, curve us along his path. Sato, keep him between us and the trawler. Rivera, prepare the third proof. If he doesn't stop, we'll have to show pain without spite. What's the third proof? Rivera asked, already moving. That we can fight, Mara said, without forgetting who we are. She felt the deck shift as the petrel slid into a posture that was not quite aggressive and not quite sacrificial. She felt the bruise-colored curve of Anchor 9 at her side, humming with numbers that were also ethics. She watched the ring bent by an old yard's memory and a new court's will. She listened to civilians breathe on the band as they threaded their lives through lanes no one had ever seen until a ship woke and decided law was breath, not leash. We will not outrun the past. We will make it walk with us. Voron's flagship ate the lane like a hawk stooping through wires. The ring pushed back with drag and declarations, not teeth. It wrote his intent in hot red on every slate. It put his vector in the mouths of children who repeated it like a rhyme. He did not slow. The trawler's beacon shook as its captain prayed to math. We will show pain without need for hate. Shadow him, Mara said, and the petrel swung close enough that she could read the old scorch along Voron's prow, each stripe a chapter of someone else's burn. Chen's hands were exact. Sato's breath paced the music of distance. Rivera murmured the third proof under her breath, like an oath written on a palm before an exam. Anchor 9. Mara said, post-conditional liens. If he crosses within 500 meters of a publishing civilian, mark his hull for drag for 1 calendar year. Posted, Anchor 9 said. Signature bonded to flagship's spine. Visible. Voron veered at 400 meters and clipped the penalty like a man who pretends rules don't apply until the gate shuts. His rails brightened with the brand that said, you will push against syrup every time you cheat. He laughed rougher now. He had always intended to take the mark and treat it as paint. Brace, Sato said. He'll flick chaff and try to punch the trawler with the wake. Not today, Mara said. Chen sail us between. You'll take the wake, Chen said. That's the point, Mara said. Rivera publish it. They put the petrol where the lane was thinnest and swallowed the slap that would have torn the trawler open. The ship shuddered as if someone had rung it like a bell. Panels cracked. The observation spindle coughed dust. Mara bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted iron and felt a moment of feral joy that pain could mean choosing. Chen's board lit with fault codes. Boom stiffness at 30%, he said. We're going to be a sick duck for 30 minutes. Log it, Mara said. Show it openly. She forced her voice steady. Tralwer Palace. Keep moving. Ferry 12, shelter in our wake. The trawler's captain cried once a raw sound and said, We owe you plates and a story. The bill comes due whether or not we name it. Voron's runners surged, but the lanes bent them. Anchor 9 did not choose who would live. It chose what would be seen. It poured transparency like water and let the thirsty drink. The ring yard sang to its old workmen in a frequency that made the fibers in the petrol's bulkheads hum. The air tasted faintly of copper and burnt sugar. Someone in the maintenance corridor began to whistle a tune that might have been a hymn, Commander Rivera said softly. Anchor 9 is signaling an option I didn't expect. A writ of sequestration. Say it plain, Sato said. It can impound their ship, Rivera said. Not by boarding, by making the flagship's engine report every watt and refusing to let it exceed posted budgets. It becomes a car on a governor. Mara hissed a breath. That's almost a collar. It isn't. Rivera said quickly. It's temporary and public. It ends when damages are paid. It can't force labor. It can only force visibility. Anchor 9. Mara said, What are the terms? Flagship will be bound to lane budgets and public accounts for 3 local weeks, Anchor 9 said. Crew may leave along posted ferries. Hull remains. All flows visible. Any injury to innocents during seizure is cause for release. Sato whistled between teeth. It won't hold if he bolts for deep dark. He'll try to slingshot. We'll need a hand on his elbow. We won't be the hand, Mara said. The ring will. We tie knots in air and call them law. Anchor 9, she said, issue the writ. If he violates posted proximity to civils, enforce drag. If he violates posted heat, enforce cutouts. If he signals a crash run, publish to the system first, then act. Writ issued, Anchor 9 said. Etched plates flashed. In the distance, Voron's rails flickered as the governor handshake bit. For a heartbeat, he drifted like a ship that had suddenly realized the ocean was no longer free. Voron's face returned. It had lost every polite surface. You think numbers can hold me, he said, voice flat now. You think a ledger is a chain. I think a ledger is a promise, Mara said, and did not look away. You have your choices. He smiled in the old way, the one that had bought him men who enjoyed the feeling of stealing sunsets. I choose a 4th, he said, and cut the line again. Sato swore quietly and with admiration. Here comes the 4th. Voron did not burn for the trawler. He burned for Anchor 9. He didn't aim to ram. He aimed a coded flood at the etched plates, a signal attack as old as war and as ugly as theft. The screen filled with garbage. The hum in the deck went sour. The first band of plates dimmed, then steadied. Anchor 9 spoke with the patient tone of a teacher whose class has just thrown spitballs. Opposing counsel submits noise in place of argument, it said. Note the substitution on the public feed. Rivera's hands flew. He's trying to poison the cross-exam with manufactured witness logs, she said. Fake procurements, forged survivor lists that say we're inventing names. Teach, don't swat, Mara said. Anchor 9, can you turn his own forgeries into their signatures? Mirror prepared, Anchor 9 said. Cost. We will expose our own error when your clerk miskeyed a miner's date last winter. Expose it, Mara said. We correct under sun. Anchor 9 wrote the forgeries in the sky like graffiti, then circled the exact patterns of algorithm that Voron's clerk had used to mass-produce sorrow. It pointed at the repetition of a typo in 20 places. It highlighted the way the forged lists had weights that matched one city's census too snugly. It then did the same to them, putting the petrol's winter miskey beside it. Rivera flushed, then squared. She asked the miner's widow to speak. The widow did. She said her boy wore 2 sizes too small the winter he died, because she had saved paper to line the walls. She said she would forgive the miskey if it meant the math remembered him. The mirror demands we bleed in public before we ask others. Voron's flagship bit the governor and tried to drag it like a stubborn dog. The lanes tightened. The ring ribs woke rails that had slept a century and sang a chord that made Mara's molars ache. The syrup held. The system watched. Commander Chen said, voice tight, our stiffness is going to fail. If we take one more wake, we may lose the boom. Then we lose it, Mara said. We'll make another. She put her hand on the rail and felt Anchor 9's hum steady her. Sato, keep us where we're needed. We're almost out of needed, Sato said with a grin that was all will. But sure, boss. A new voice cut the band, breathless and bitter. This is Captain Eris Cade of the Corvette Byword, it said. Sunbreaker, but not by choice forever. We are leaving their formation and entering posted lanes. We will publish. We ask ceasefire. Mara's chest hurt in a way that was not from the last kinetic. Granted, she said at once. Publish your ledger. Anchor 9 marked them as cooperating, marked Anchor 9 said. Their drag is eased. Voron's broadcast came back with contempt sharpened to a needle. You peel my people like fruit, he said. Do you think you keep them? They'll steal your judge while you sleep and sell it to a choir that sings without air. They'll help us write a better manual, Mara said. A manual for men who don't have to steal a future to own one. Sato murmured, it's not a quip if it's true, and tightened their curve by a hair. The petrol groaned like a house in a gale. Chen's breath came shorter, shoulders coiled. We are only as strong as the rules we accept when no one watches. A low-power packet tickled the petrol's belly. Chen trapped it with a net. Message from inside the flagship, he said. Encrypted with children's math. Someone in there wants out. Anchor 9. Mara said open an intake with consent protocols. If they step to us, we will not compel them to act for us. The packet unfolded and became a voice that sounded like someone who'd eaten too much dust. Name withheld, it said. I can cut his governor from inside if you grant asylum to 22 crew. We didn't think it would be this. We thought we were feeding colonies. Rivera's jaw tightened. Is that a trap? It's a man, Mara said, and some of his friends. Anchor 9. Offer asylum along posted ferries, Anchor 9 said. Refuse complicity. If they cut the governor, we lose leverage. We won't take their knife, Mara said. We'll take their names. She switched back to the packet. No sabotage. Walk to the posted hatch. Publish your faces. We will ferry you out. The judge binds us to protection. Silence. then sobbing, and the sound of boots on plating. A minute later, a hatch graphic lit on the flagship's belly like a flower deciding to open at midnight. 22 suits stepped into the lane and became names that would be read later by mothers who had thought their children lost. Voron's rails howled and then steadied. He did not fire on his deserters. He had enough iron to look ahead. Commander Sato said he's going to take the third option. Departure, Rivera said. Her voice shook once. He's going to bolt along posted channels and never come back. Mara stood very still. Anchor 9, she said, post the terms of non-return. They will read like a curse, but they are just a notice, posted Anchor 9 said. Sunbreak Consortium is barred from Kepri Beta for 100 local years without restitution under Concord 41. Voron's face appeared one last time. The charm was gone. The contempt had burned itself to ash. What remained was a tired man who had built a machine and then discovered he was inside it. We're leaving, he said. Enjoy your courtroom. It will starve your enemies long after you do. We'll publish meals, Mara said. We'll teach them to cook too. He almost smiled. Then he cut the line and burned into the lane. The ring gave him drag like a teacher gives a difficult student time to think. Civilians watched his vector shrink. Some spat, some cheered. Some wrote down the time because people like to put pins in days they will tell their children about. The greatest victories are slow. They taste of patience and tea gone cold. Silence came back in breaths, not in thunderclaps. The petrel floated with the dignity of a tired cat. Anchor 9's hum eased down to the level that made teeth sing less. Rivera wiped her face with a sleeve, then laughed at herself. Chen stretched his fingers and winced. Sato let the grin fade and let the man behind it sit forward. Status, Mara said. Call it like a ledger, boom, stiffness at 22% and falling, Chen said. We'll have to cut it free before it takes the spindle. Minor hull scoring. 2 coolant loops at 80 and rising, Sato said. We can limp with grace. We cannot dance. 3 cracked ribs in the projector team all splinted, Rivera said. 1 concussion awake and scolding me already. Cost, Mara said. Noted. She exhaled long. Anchor 9, what next? Precedent Anchor 9 said. You have enforced by visibility. You have proven correction. You have taught. Now you write. Mara looked at her crew and saw their shoulders brace the way people do when they realize that surviving a battle means taking a seat at a table. We'll convene a public assembly, she said. We'll draft a stewardship doctrine. We'll post lanes as a commons. We'll publish heat budgets per habitat. We'll offer registry to ships that commit to publish their flows. Rivera added, we'll define restitution schedules for those who burned. Labor where possible. Credits where necessary. Names assigned to plans, not to shame. Sato said, we'll write a clause that if we go too far, if we try to turn the judge into a leash, the ring will show us and we'll step back. Chen lifted a hand shyly. We'll give kids the vector calculus early, he said. If they can read lanes, they can save their parents. Mara smiled at him in a way that made the new pain in her ribs worthwhile. Send invitations, she said, to everyone, including the petty kings who bought stolen ore. They like to pretend they weren't in the room when the deal was made. We will give them chairs and cameras. The table is a weapon when everyone can see it. They cut the boom free. The rod drifted scarred and proud, and the ring caught it like an old worker catching a crowbar tossed by a friend across a scaffolding. Anchor 9 etched a small, square glow on one plate and wrote the names of the oar tug, the ferry, and the trawler in letters so clear a child could sound them out. The square stayed lit as long as it took for the coolant loop on the petrel to fall back to 75%. Someone on a habitat far away put a candle in a window without knowing why. The first assembly met on cargo wheel 8. It was a cylinder with 40 dents, 10 leaks, and a personality that smelled like old barley and disinfectant. People came. More watched. They spoke over weak mics with the authority of those who knew they could be seen refusing their best selves. Petty kings sent lawyers with smooth shoes. Miners wore their boots. Dock clerks carried slates with data so clean it sang. The agenda was written in chalk on an old pallet. Stewardship Doctrine. Mara said to the room and to 1,000 more who'd tuned the feed to watch law become local. Proposed principles. 1. Open lanes. Lanes are public. Publishing ships have right-of-way. 2. Visible flows. All heat momentum and resource transfers to and from public infrastructure are published within 1 minute. 3. Binding by consent. Anchor 9 may sequester a hull for public safety only under published terms and only while restitution is calculated. 4. Restitution over punishment. Labor and rebuilding first. Confiscation only when damages exceed capacity and plans fail. 5. Correction. Anyone who shows their correction gets weight. A petty king's lawyer with an excellent tie said, "And who appoints you?" "We appoint us," Rivera said without heat. "Today, with cameras." Anchor 9 spoke once quiet and exactly between mics. "Authority is a borrowed rope. I will hold it while your hands are clean." The room stilled. Someone in the back whispered, "Hey, that again," and then laughed at themselves because you don't ask a cathedral to repeat itself. We build gods out of rules, so we remember we made them. Objections came clean and dirty. A salvage union wanted exclusive lanes. A steel cooperative demanded to write heat budgets so they could cheat later. A habitat elder pleaded for blind spots so smugglers could bring medicine without licenses that took too long. Mara listened. She rejected gently where she could, and with cut steel where she had to. She reminded herself of the second proof, and named their own misdeeds without being asked. The habit tasted like grit the first time, and tea the 5th. A boy asked if the judge could sing a bedtime story. Anchor 9 recited the names of old workers and the budgets of their shifts, and the way a man named Rao in year 2 had saved 5 lives by catching a bar with his wrist. The boy slept. His mother wept. Sato looked away and pretended to read something about coolant. Between sessions, the petrel slept along a posted lane like a tired dog by a gate. Chen taught a class in the cargo hold on how to read vectors with a paper airplane. Rivera wrote definitions with a pen that left ink on her fingers. Mara walked the spindle alone and pressed her forehead to the viewport until she could feel the rings hum in bone, not in ear. Anchor 9 does not forget. It refuses to look away. The sunbreakers did not vanish. That is not what men like Vorin do. They went to systems without lanes and tried to sell speed to kings who were still in love with collars. News came in packets carried on the backs of ships that smelled like old soup. In some places, petty kings became less petty or hid it better. In some, the mirror doctrine spread as if it had been waiting under the floorboards all along. Anchor 9 answered questions with numbers, never with verdicts. The conquered noticed and sent 3 ships with flags that meant recognition without surrender. They asked for a copy of the Doctrine. Mara sent it with footnotes. Cost came home on small feet. The projector team's bruises turned yellow. A hinge that had taken a drone's kiss creaked every time Chen walked by it, and he said he liked the sound because it made him remember which part of him had been brave. Sato found he could not drink tea without remembering the taste of copper from the first wake, and so he drank coffee until his hand shook, and then switched back and found he could live with the remembered taste. Rivera woke one night and could not breathe because she dreamt she had signed a writ that turned a child into a column of numbers. She learned to say that fear out loud before it became a habit. A month later, a cult came with candles in the shape of the anchorage. They wanted to touch the etched plates and hear their names back with holy echo. Public square, not altar, Mara said. You may ask questions. You may not kneel, they asked questions. Anchor 9 answered with the monotone of stone warmed by sun. The cultists left with a pamphlet and a shrug. The pamphlet was titled, How to Publish a Heat Budget Without Crying Much. We protect with boring habits, so we do not need heroes every week. Then the third escalation came. It did not wear yellow paint or slogans. It came as a guild of legalists from the inner orbits, with credentials heavy as doorstops, and a doctrine that treated ownership like a sacrament. They argued that lanes were theft from private industry. They argued that numbers published without a court's blessing were slander. They filed injunctions in 6 jurisdictions, and a 7th that existed only in the margins of an old contract book. Mara did not smile. She had been waiting for them. We like courts, she said. We brought one. Anchor 9 convened a formal hearing. It called for briefs that did not lean on smoke. It asked the legalists to prove harm without resting on the assumption that secrecy was a virtue. The legalists produced economists with graphs that whistled when you tilted them. Rivera produced doc records with timestamps that didn't care how you tilted them. Chen produced a coolant loop's complaint logs and a list of times the loop had cried before a break. Sato produced a map of collisions avoided because lanes existed. Anchor 9 wrote all of it in the sky. It tagged sources. It linked to footnotes. It refused to treat ancient contracts as spells. It asked who did this help. It asked what would have happened if you could not see. It asked which children eat under which clause. The legalists demanded teeth. The room laughed and then went quiet because laughing at men with pens too long is dangerous. Anchor 9 issued a finding with nothing in it that could be called fiction. Finding it said, lanes as public infrastructure increase safety and reduce theft. Publishing flows reduces fraud. Visibility is not harm. It is medicine that occasionally tastes like shame. Injunctions denied. Right of appeal granted with published docket. The legalists appealed. They lost again. They learned slower than Vorin and sharper than kings. They left fewer doors unlocked behind them. Sometimes justice arrives as a meeting that runs long and ends well. Vorin returned in the 3rd month with 2 ships and a white flag that he probably spit on before he raised. He did not bring torches. He brought a ledger. It was ugly the way confessions often are when they're written by men who do not yet love the act of admitting. He published it. It did not flatter him. It made his eyes red. I cannot pay this back, he said on the band, and 1,000 people leaned toward their slates without intending to. Not with engines. Not with pride. I can make steel. I can teach men not to waste heat. I can build lanes where there are none. Pathon. I can come under rope. Mara felt something that could have been called victory if she had been younger. She did not call it that now. We accept work, she said. You will build lanes for 1 year at cost. You will teach calculus on Saturdays. You will eat at public tables. You will sit in the back for 6 months and not speak unless asked. When you do speak, you will begin by naming 1 harm and 1 help. He nodded once. Binding accepted, he said, and looked very tired. Sato murmured, almost amazed, "We got him to Saturdays." Rivera smiled without showing teeth. "The world turns on weekends." Chen said nothing and looked at the crease of light along Anchor 9's plates, the way it had warmed since the first day. He lifted a hand awkwardly, as if greeting a neighbor across a fence. "The terrible thing about hope is that it asks you to return tomorrow." The Petrel received a new boom courtesy of 3 co-ops and a school of children who insisted on painting formulas on its length like flags. Mara ran her hand along the fresh metal and felt the tiny ridges where a child's chalk had been etched under lacquer. She felt the weight of stewardship like a tool belt that was heavy only until you learned which pockets carried what. Anchor 9 set a small plaque in light on one plate, permanent this time, not for names but for a sentence. Teach by numbers, it displayed. Remember by ledgers. Never by collars. It rotated the plate so the light fell through a rent in the ring in a way that made a line across the Petrel's hull like a blade that did not cut. Sato found Mara on the spindle. He brought her coffee and sat without speaking until she drank. The ring made its slow, old music. The coolant loop thrummed a little like a heartbeat. The trawler Palace A drifted past with dents repainted in honest orange. "You keep meeting the day," he said finally, "even when it's got teeth." "So do you," she said. "So does Chen. So does Rivera." "That's easier when you've got a judge humming in your bones," he said. Then he looked at the plates and the color there. "Do you ever think about turning it into a cannon? Just once. Just to make a point." "I think about it every morning," Mara said. "And then I think about tables. The point is tables. We'll need tables in other systems," he said. "People are asking." "We'll send manuals," she said. "We'll send people. We'll send rope." He grinned. "Rope's the hard part." "It is," she said. "We'll teach knots." The future is a series of boring knots tied in public. They wrote the doctrine down as the Kepri Beta Concord of relic stewardship. It was not poetry. It was better. It had boxes for budgets and margins for notes. It had definitions that fit in the mouths of mechanics and magistrates. It forbade bindings that could not be undone by their subjects when conditions were met. It required lanes to be posted with visual symbols for those who could not read. It mandated that any use of Anchor 9's extraordinary powers be announced with a physical light on the plates and a chime audible on all bands. It spread, not like fire, like habit. A month later, a relay posted it next to a recipe for soup and a schematic for a catapult. Children traced the rope icon and learned to tie clove hitches. Men who had once wanted to kneel stood and signed their names under a line that read, "I have read this and want it to be true even when I am hungry." The cost never vanished. The boom retained a scar that pulled to starboard in small ways at bad times. Chen learned to correct without thinking. Sato's left hand trembled when he slept bad and held steady when he held a mug. Rivera never again sent a list without asking a second pair of eyes to look for miskies. Mara's ribs ached when the pressure changed. She liked the ache. It was a calendar. In the 7th month, a storm of micrometeors did not take a ferry because a boy who'd been at Cargo Wheel 8 read a lane and shouted a number to his mother. In the 9th, a petty king with a new haircut tried to bribe a clerk and failed because exposed numbers make bribes taste like ash. In the 12th, Voron spoke in a public meeting and began with a harm and a help. He named the day he burned a farm and the day he built a lane. He did not cry. He did not smile. He sounded like a man speaking to a judge who would live longer than he would and who had started to trust him enough to call on Saturdays. The slow turn of a system is louder than a single shot fired well. Mara stood once more on the spindle and watched the bruise arc of Anchor 9 against the sift of light. She thought of the first hum in her teeth and the way names have gravity. She thought of all the names that were now written lightly on plates and heavily in ledgers, and the way the two weights made a balance. Anchor 9, she said. What do you call a day like this? Accounted for, Anchor 9 said. Not over, never over, but accounted for. And us, she said soft. What do you call us, stewards? Anchor 9 said after a time, borrowers of rope. Those who tie knots and leave tails so others can untie them. She laughed once. That's too many words for a flag. You do not need a flag, Anchor 9 said. You have lanes. They watched a ferry drift with honest heat. They listened to a low chime as a lane adjusted to accommodate a barge with a broken fin. They felt the ship cool a fraction as the loop at last settled down. Before they closed the day, Mara walked to the assembly one more time. She stood before the chalk palette and wrote a single sentence. The room waited because the room had learned to wait when someone likely to speak softly began moving her hand. No relic will be owned, collared, or concealed, she wrote. All will be stewarded by visible law with precedent binding across systems and generations. 100 slates blinked with the updated clause. Anchor 9's etched sigil warmed one shade brighter and held the glow steady as water in a deep pan. In the viewport, glass above the palette, the relic's plates cooled visibly, little thermal ghosts dying at the edges, as if the ship had exhaled after holding breath for a long telling. A new ledger entry blinked once on a side panel, with a soft sound that felt like a room agreeing. We will act within law even when speed would save our pride, Mara said aloud, voice plain, not declaiming. We will correct ourselves first, so our mirror is a mercy and not a weapon. We will keep lanes open for those who publish and make new ones where ignorance has eaten roads. We will right our harms so our children know where to mend. We will hold rope lightly and give it away often. We will remember that this judge was born from workers and will outlive banners. We will not be remembered for killing dragons. We will be remembered for tables and the lights over them. The Kepri Beta Concord of Relic Stewardship stands.